when I realized, and this is so my mission was to find out what we're basing our recommendations off of, right? Like that was the mission. And that's why I did all the why asking. And what I found was that when it comes to physical rehabilitation and fitness, every recommendation that is being made out there is rooted in cadaveric anatomy.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the show. Today I have on the show Matthew Lobosco, and Matthew is an author, a coach, he's a movement specialist and a presenter. And after navigating 5 orthopedic surgeries before the age of 22, he suffered from anxiety, depression, and just feelings of hopelessness. He spent the next 20 years really dissecting the foundations of health and the traditional health model and what it really means to be healthy. And that's what we talk about today. I loved this conversation with Matthew and our chat about the difference between health and vitality, why we should really stop trying to be healthy, why we shouldn't be trying to avoid stress. It goes against everything that we're taught in the traditional health model, right? And he's going to dissect all of this based on these 2 decades of research and support from all of these different mentors and degrees and certifications and all these studies that he's done. I love this conversation, and I really think he's got so many tangible things to take away that you can take with you to really transform your health journey. So let's jump in.
All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Matthew, and we are talking all about health and vitality today, and his book also on the same subject, which I'm excited to chat about. So thanks so much for joining me today, Matthew.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Yes, for sure. So let's kind of start, I guess, from the beginning. If you can just kind of give the audience a little introduction, talk about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can tell a little bit about where it all started, right? We all have our stories. I always get such a kick out of just seeing random people walking around the world and just look at them and say, you know what, they have a whole story.
They have a story. That's right.
They have a story. So here's my story, right?
Let's hear it.
Yeah, I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, and I grew up in the medical model. My dad was a doctor. My mom was a nurse practitioner. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of perks to having, medical professionals in your home, high access to pretty much whatever the medical field can offer you. And so a lot of perks. And I needed all of them based on what I'm going to tell you, because at a very young age, I just was struggling with a lot of, we'll just call it sports injuries, orthopedic injuries. I had my first surgery as a sophomore in high school, and then kind of literally limped my way through high school sports. I had to stop playing baseball, actually before I even got to high school, and then had to quit soccer my junior year after making the all-state team, which wasn't really fun, not to come back my senior year after that. And then I was able to kind of squeak in my basketball in my senior year, and about a month before the season ended, I had a really bad ankle injury and finished my high school career 40 points short of scoring 1,000 points. So it was a little rough, on the old ego there as a 17, 18-year-old kid. And, I just kind of grew up at that time with what is going on? Why does my body keep breaking down? And why do I keep needing surgeries? I had 3 surgeries before I was 20 years old, and then I turned down 2 major surgeries between 20 and 23. And I became obsessed, would be one word, about getting strong. And I did a deep dive into, we'll just call it the traditional fitness model and strength training, and got every certification you could possibly imagine, Olympic strength training. I mean, it's just off the charts, spending money I didn't have to learn from the gurus and experts out there. And I got really, really strong. And I'm from New Jersey, so I can say this. I was a Jersey meathead. Okay, that's just the way that was. At one point I was, probably 215, 8% body fat, looked all of the fitness, what the fitness model would consider I've arrived. And I'll remember this day because it obviously changed. It literally was the day that set me on the trajectory that I'm at now. And I was in the Upper East Side working out with a buddy of mine, and we were doing, military press on a seated bench, and we were going for a PR, personal record. And I remember sitting on that bench, and there was a lot of weight on that bar. And he helped me unrack it. I pressed it over my head, brought it down, racked it. And I'm going to tell you, Hope, like in that moment, there was hope. I said, you know what? I feel like I finally arrived. I feel like I've overcome all of these injuries. I'm not broken. Yay for Matt. Got up off the bench, took 3 steps, and my whole right arm went, and I couldn't move it.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it was brutal. And this was the elbow I already had surgery on, and did all the rehab on it, and so on and so forth. And it was rough because I was like, man, maybe I am totally screwed here. I'm totally broken. And, I had my orthopedics surgeon's number on speed dial by that point. So that was pretty handy. And I gave him a call, and I'm like, my elbow, I'm pretty sure it's officially exploded. We need to get, I got to come in for surgery. And so I went to see him that next week, and went in, standard, orthopedic appointment. You go in and they do their little poking around, and they take the x-rays, and they do all their assessments. And I'm anxiously waiting in that little room, right, that they keep so damn cold. And you're waiting for him to come back in the room so that he can tell you what's wrong with you and how we can fix you. Right. It's like, oh, please come save me. And I'll never forget what he said when he came in the room. He came in the room, he looked at me, and he goes, Matt, I don't see anything wrong with your elbow. What are you like? I don't know. Whatever it was in that moment just hit me like a 2x4. I'm like, how could you possibly say that? Right. And what occurred to me is like, oh, your machines can't figure out what's wrong, like what's going on. Okay, I get that. And but what I also realized in that moment, Hope, is how unfair it is for me to expect him to be able to have all the answers and tell me how to fix this, because I mean, this system is intricately complex. And after all, we do call it the practice of medicine, right? Like we are practicing on all of us, right? And so in that moment, it just dawned on me that this model that I've been very, very intricately, connected with, has some major limitations. And, he said, he did offer me, he's like, well, we can go in there and see what we find. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to pass this time, man. I just feel like it's time for me to seek other alternatives. And that set me on I'll just call it my why journey. And I just started asking the why question to everything. So every accepted truth about health, every accepted approach to health, to physical rehabilitation. Why are we telling people to do dead bugs if they have back pain? Why are we telling people to grab this resistance band and do these external rotate? Like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Why do we have people on these machines to strengthen their hamstrings? What do we strengthen their hamstrings for? Like, I was the annoying person in every seminar and class that I was in from that day forward. And then I did the same thing with nutrition. Why is salad healthy? Why is every magazine, is there a salad on the cover? Why? I don't get it. Why is it good if there's no calories, no fat, no salt, no sugar? Why is that good again? Can somebody help me out here? I'm really not understanding this. And then I did the same thing over the last 10 years, did a wickedly deep dive. I actually got involved with a personal development company and helped build their whole company, and then left at the end of last year because it got really bad. We can save that maybe for another podcast if you want. But just started questioning, like, why are we trying to avoid stress? Why are we trying to mitigate stress? Why are we telling people to breathe through this? Why are we telling people to let go of these things? I don't understand. Can someone please tell me why we're doing this? And I just didn't accept the reasons. Well, it works. So then I would go to, well, what does it mean? How are we measuring it works? Because I can tell you, if someone has back pain and you put your arm around them and you say, hey, it's going to be all right, their back might feel better. So does that work to heal back pain? And if that's how we're defining it, that's fine. But I just want to understand how we're defining it works. Right. And so I just went on this, and I mean obsessive, and you could probably tell I'm slightly intense and passionate about this stuff. And I just went after it. And this was 22 years of my wife and I, God bless her. We have moved, I think it's 16 times, 16, 17 times since we've been together, because it's been a relentless journey of seeking answers and asking people that could answer the questions in a way that was rooted in some kind of principle, some kind of something I could put my feet down on, not, well, if your left shoelace is untied and it's a full moon and you eat this herb, your back pain goes away. It's like, that's cool. Nothing against that, but I want more. I want something I can really use as a foundation to not only help myself, but to help people, help others.
So on this journey that you went on, what would you say would be, I'd usually save these for the end, but we're just in it, so I might as well go for it. But like, what do you, I mean, you've learned a lot. You've done a lot of education and all that. So what do you think are like the biggest things that you learned from this journey, and maybe things that like the general population doesn't really understand?
Yeah. So this kind of goes to the topic that we talking about today, right? Which is, I think it's important to understand that striving to be healthy is extremely limiting. And here's what I mean by it. When you define the word health is defined as the absence of illness and disease. And so the entire model that we have, the best they can get you is to not be sick. Like, wait a minute. Please tell me there's more than that. Like there's got to be more to life than just not being sick. And so, if you look at the traditional cultures, human history, the medicine woman / man of a village was paid to keep everybody healthy. They benefited when everybody was healthy, right? If people were sick, they would be fired. They wouldn't be there anymore. Our society is the literal opposite of that.
Totally.
Everybody benefits when people are sick.
Yeah.
So we can call that, unintended consequences would be one friendly way to put it. And there's other ways to put it too, but we won't go there. And so I just, I think that was one thing that was so obvious to me, and why I don't want people to be not trusting of what's out there. Like, I'm not here to try to create paranoia.
Right.
But I guess what I've learned and what I try to teach every client I work with is how to trust their own biology, their own physiology, and how to get back connected to themselves and trust themselves.
100%.
Whether you want to call it intuition, whether you want to call it the divine consciousness that lives inside of us, there's lots of different words that people will use for this, right? And so, but I feel like there's so much fear mongering and so much fear. And, you just turn on a commercial, and I'll never forget the one commercial I watched where it's really dark. It's dreary. And there's a man walking around. You know that 80% of men that have blue shoes on die of a heart attack after, you know what I mean? Like, whatever the crazy.
Yes.
And then, but Zabada, right? The drug pops on and the sun comes out. I forgot. There's a stretcher following the guy, right? While this Freddy Cougar voice is doing the narration. And then Zabada comes out and the stretcher gets caught in the doors. I mean, anyway, I think we all get the point.
Yes. It's ridiculous.
And so it's like, what did I learn, and what can I offer an audience as an actual to something to start to move towards is getting reconnected to yourself and trusting that your physiology, biology, and those whispers of knowing, to put more trust in that than somebody that has a lot of letters next to their name that happen to benefit from whatever they're selling you.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that the things that the medical profession offers doesn't have use.
Right.
There is absolute.
Yeah.
There's a place for all of it. So I don't throw anything away, but personally, I've learned that nobody knows what's best for your body but you.
Yeah.
Period. End of story.
Mm-hmm.
So get educated and find things that get you better connected to yourself so that you can better communicate with yourself, so that you can better leverage the things that are out in the world.
Right.
So you're not enslaved to them.
Right. Yeah, no, it's 100%. This is like the like motto of my soul. Like this is what I teach, because I mean, for me, I usually call it intuition or, the inner voice or whatever. Yeah. Whatever you want to call it. But that's the thing. I think we, at some point in our lives, I don't know what point that is, but at some point we somehow tune that piece out, because it's always there, right? But for some reason or some way, something happens, whether it's societal conditioning or whatever it is, we start to tune that piece out. And then we think that, we have to listen. We have to go find the answers outside of ourselves. Like, well, somebody's got to have the answer. Because I mean, that's the women I work with. It's like, they've literally been looking everywhere. Like, somebody just tell me the freaking answer. Like, somebody tell me what to do. And I mean, I'm going to help them. But at the same time, like, I want to empower you with the knowledge of how your body works, and let's understand things so that you can figure it out,
Amen.
So so going back to your story, so you decided like, okay, I'm not going to do the surgery or whatever. So what was the thing that helped, like, you felt like your body was falling apart? What was the thing for you? And I'm sure it wasn't just like one thing, but what was the thing for you that helped you kind of like get your body functioning again where you weren't falling apart?
No, great question. When I realized, and this is so my mission was to find out what we're basing our recommendations off of, right? Like, that was the mission. And that's why I did all the why asking. And what I found was that when it comes to physical rehabilitation and fitness, every recommendation that is being made out there is rooted in cadaveric anatomy. And so what does that mean? It means that we studied a cadaver. We looked at the bicep. We saw that it, originated up, up on the shoulder, crossed over the elbow. And when we shortened it artificially, it flexed the elbow. And so we all wrote down on our little notepad, the bicep flexes the elbow. And then we did it with the hamstring. And then we did it with this. And so we created this structure of how the body works off of a dead person. And then we extrapolate with human people moving that are alive and in the world, functioning in the world, and we're rehabilitating them like they're dead. And what's so fascinating, when I met people that were way smarter than me, Hope, to teach me this, that, when you have back pain, or you're trying to learn how to throw a baseball like I was, or rehabilitate a knee, or rehabilitate a shoulder, or a low back, all of the recommendations were based on isolating muscles and assuming that this muscle's weak, this muscle's tight, stretch, strength, bridge, all these dead bug exercises, core exercises. All of these things were literally isolating muscles, trying to get them to scream, and then expecting them to work as an integrated chain. So the best analogy I can give you is if you were a conductor of an orchestra and you took every instrument, every musician, and you put them in a room and you taught each instrument to play as loud as possible, right? The tubas and the strings and the percussion. You just got everybody in isolated room to play as loud as they can. Okay. That's do bicep curls, then do shoulder presses, then do bridges, whatever. And then bring them all into the same room and ask them to play music. That's a lot of noise, right? That's what we're doing. That's what the exercise and physical rehabilitation model predominantly does to people. So what does the hamstring do? What do the bicep do? It depends on the task. To say that the hamstring flexes the knee is like saying mom's job is to change diapers. What do moms do? They change diapers. That's what they do. Like, that's an insult. You want to get smacked? Like, say that to a mom, right?
Totally.
Like, it's an insult. Well, that's how we're treating the body. And so I learned from, like I said, my mentors, and I will travel to study with these people. They taught me chain reaction biomechanics. They taught me how to assess movement. So when I was told never to throw a baseball again because of my elbow, and I have nerve damage here, and to this day it was trashed, and told me never to throw a ball again. Once they taught me, the reason why this is happening is because of all these exercises they're doing to help you rehabilitate it. We need to teach you how it actually works,
right.
and how the hip and the trunk and the shoulder, like, really put the chain together. Mm-hmm. And ever since I started learning from it, and the individuals that I would give that taught me this, I don't know anybody else out there that teaches chain reaction biomechanics. It's the Gray Institute, so I have nothing to do with them. And my mentor that I talk about in my book, Lenny, he's the one that taught me all this stuff. And I mean, I can throw a baseball. There's nothing I'm limited by to this day. I'm honestly in better shape at 44 than I was at 23, which mm-hmm. is not usually the case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally. So then what do you think, you talk a little bit about this, you've talked about this before, the difference between the exercise paradigm and the movement paradigm? Like, what is the difference?
The difference is the exercise paradigm is cadaveric anatomy based. It isolates muscles. It's more muscle focused, mm-hmm. right? It's evolved a little bit. So it's like, well, I don't do chest mat, I do push day. And I do pull day, right? But when you really look, you go to a gym, exercise land has a lot of rules, mm-hmm. right? That's how you know you're in exercise land. Like, hold in your, squeeze your gut ins, bring your shoulder blades down, keep your chin up, knees over second toe, don't let It's very rigid, very robotic.
Yeah.
And it creates dysfunction. Okay. Now, if you come to me and say, Matt, I want to win a bodybuilding competition, then you need to do bench pressing.
Right.
So this idea of functional exercise, like, that word, I think I don't know what people mean when they say it, because for a power lifter, bench pressing is a functional exercise.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So mm-hmm. I distinguish it. Functional exercise is relative to what the person's trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. Anatomically functional, that's how I think about it. It's like, oh, well, would the body prefer to do it that way?
Right.
No, it wouldn't. Like, what we'd call a cheat curl, in exercise land, is actually the way the body would prefer to do it, because it makes more sense. it never wants to isolate anything and repetitively move it over and over again. It doesn't make any sense. It's not efficient.
Right.
So that's exercise paradigm. It's anytime parts of the body are frozen and other parts of the body are moving. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying there's not a place for that. So don't get me wrong. Like, there's a place for everything.
Yeah.
But if you want, what I would call vitality, which is longevity and the ability to play soccer with your kids someday, or be able to bend over and pick something up without your back exploding when you're 70, like, you want to make sure your foundational workout program, in my opinion, is rooted in integrated movements. And I'm going to use the word squatting and lunging, but there are the exercise equivalents of squatting and lunging. Right? Like an exercise squat is very rigid, and all those rules I said. And in my world, a movement squat is literally bending over and picking something up and basically breaking every rule that the exercise paradigm has. Like, make sure you flex your spine. Mm-hmm. That's probably the most important thing with the movement squat, is flex your spine, mm-hmm. right? In exercise land, it's like, oh my God, don't flex your spine, right? But suck your gut in there really hard, because we got to make sure your back doesn't explode.
Yep.
It's like, well, maybe we should rethink this. Why do we have to create such of this intra-abdominal pressure in order to keep this exercise safe? Maybe we weren't really designed to do it that way.
Right. What do you think in terms of, because you mentioned before, like, we try so hard to avoid stress, and we try. So what do you, like, what's the alternative in your mind, and in talking about vitality, like, what's the alternative?
Yeah. Another great question. And this is probably one of the most, I'll just say, if I've worked with you in the past and you're listening to this podcast with Hope here, let me just apologize. Because if I worked with you a couple of years ago, I'm sorry. I was teaching you how to shut off the stress response, how to avoid it, how to let go of these negative emotions, and I apologize. Mm-hmm. So that being said, and honestly, this isn't me, Hope. These are people that are way smarter, but the people that it's actually, I would say, Aaliyah Crum from Stanford and even Kelly McGonigal. Look them up on YouTube. They have some great stuff out there. But what they have discovered is actually, it's Leah Crum and her crew that came up with something called the stress mindset theory. And what they found, which was just mind blowing to me, that the stress response, and I think we can all relate to this, how the stress response in some cases, I mean, we'll all agree that the stress response, will ruin your health, decrease performance, and decrease your well-being, right? I don't think we don't need any studies to show us that.
Right.
But I think we can also look at moments of high stress where our performance increased, our resiliency increased, and our well-being increased, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute here. How can there be these two completely opposite responses to stress? And this is what they studied. And why do some people, they get sharper, they're high performing, they're more resilient, right? Like, what's going on here? And then why are other people getting crushed by this thing?
Right.
And what they discovered was one of the most significant influences to whether stress has this negative effect, we'll call it, or a positive effect, is how we relate to stress. For the people that are looking to avoid it and mitigate it, they are finding and again, you can check the studies out. Again, go to Leah Crum, there's all there. They measured the blood pressure, they measured the constriction of the arteries and all of these things. And the only difference between group A and group B was the way they looked at it. Okay. To the point where the people that looked at it as, oh my God, this is a challenge. I'm going to overcome it. I'm going to get after it. My body is helping me to overcome an obstacle. Because that's really what the stress response is. If you think about it, it's an up leveling of resources to overcome something that's important for us to overcome. It's mobilizing the resources, right? And here's one of the coolest things. One of the resources it mobilizes is a hormone called oxytocin. I'm sure you've heard of that, right, Hope? Well, oxytocin, in some circles, which I always find very funny, they call it the cuddle hormone. Have you heard this? Yeah, okay. Because it's a hormone that draws us to connect with others. It's like the social hormone. What's so fascinating about the stress response is not only is it mobilizing resources with adrenaline and cortisol and these types of things, even dopamine plays a role there. But oxytocin secreted from the stress response, which I thought was fascinating. It's like, well, why would the body during a time of stress secrete oxytocin? Because you need to reach out to people and ask for support.
That is
how cool is
crazy.
That?
That's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like our biology knows what it's doing.
That's insane.
It's so cool. But when we teach people to shut it down, mitigate, avoid it, we're working against ourselves.
Right.
And we're not leveraging this incredibly powerful machine that actually has our back.
Totally. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Isn't it?
That's amazing. Yeah. I find that so fascinating because, and I say this all the time and not with those words, but it's like, I always say, like, your body has everything it needs to heal itself. Like, like our body is equipped with everything it needs to heal itself. Like, sometimes it just needs some help. But like, literally, your body is equipped, like what you're saying, your body is equipped to push you through a stressful situation, like to get you through to the other side. I think I saw, and it's funny because, so that study, there might be, I'm sure there's multiple studies, but my husband sent me something on Instagram. It was a couple weeks ago. I want to say it was from the Joe Rogan show, but I can't remember. But there was a guy talking about it. It was a scientist, and he was talking about that exact thing, that how people relate to stress, that is like the end result, how they respond to the stress. It's like their thoughts about the stress.
I bet you it was Andrew Huberman.
It might have been.
He's another, he actually, I know he was on Rogan, and I also know that he interviewed Leah Crum.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure it was him. And it was a dude. So that might've been him. But I was like, and because my husband sent me that, and I'm like, this is crazy. Because like you're saying, and I feel like in my world too, like, I work with a lot of like energy stuff and emotions and that kind of thing. I feel like it's kind of similar there, where it's like, okay, when you stuff down the emotions and you don't allow yourself to feel the emotions, then they're stored in the body. They're stored 100%. As chemicals in the body. It's the same thing. Like, 100%. Let's feel it and move through it and push through to the other side. Like, that's what builds resiliency. And that's what allows us to like transmute things to get to the other side.
Correct.
So like, why are we trying to like prevent what just needs to just naturally happen.
Exactly. And the emotion thing, I think I'm so glad you brought that up, and I'm all aboard with what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And the piece that I have learned and again, I'm learning this myself. So just be clear, everybody. I always say to people, if you have any fantasy about me and my capacity, just call my wife. She'll set you straight. But like learning how to integrate the emotional communication. That's another piece I talk about in my book. And it's like, I don't think the goal or the target should be to be happy. Mm-hmm. Meaning, like, when we're focused on, I just want to be joyful, I just want to be peaceful, we're focusing on an emotion. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the roles of emotion, what emotions are, is they're a communication system. Mm-hmm. And what they're telling you, and this is what they're finding and with the brain, is like, and the hippocampus plays a big role with this, is it kind of detects when you're out of alignment with who and what's important to you. Mm-hmm. And emotions will get activated. As an example, we'll just call them the negative emotions. I don't like calling them negative emotions, but we'll call them the emotions that are not comfortable. When they go off, it's an indication that something's off. We need to pay attention. Mm-hmm. And that's really, it's even what anxiety does. Anxiety is an emotion that literally increases your sensitivity and has you be super hyper aware and focused. There's a reason. So the question to ask is, why am I anxious? Mm-hmm. What is it that's not, something's off here, and I need to listen to this communication? The best analogy I can give you is like a navigation system in your car. What's the first thing we want to do when we use a navigation system? Enter the what?
Where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. The destination. What's the most meaningful and important place for me to go right now? I put it in the navigation system. And then as I'm going towards this, we'll call it, ideal target, the navigation system tells me when I'm off. Mm-hmm. Okay. It kind of might yell at me. It might say, hey, you made a left. You should have made a right. To me, that's emotions. So if I say, hey, what's most important to me, what's most meaningful to me is to live this life, to be this person, to create this outcome. Okay. If I'm aligned with that person and that outcome, I'll be fulfilled and happy. It's the byproduct. Right. And if I'm not aligned with that person or that reality, I'm going to have that asymmetry within me and where I'm headed. And those, we'll call them more, negative emotions, are activated. Mm-hmm. Right. And here's another fascinating little ditty that I recently learned. Do you know what emotion activates neuroplasticity in the brain to trigger learning? Like, the emotion that actually puts you in the best position to learn something, it's frustration. Frustration is the emotion that they find that opens the brain up. And just think about it for a second. When are we frustrated? Mm-hmm. When things aren't going the way we thought they would go, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the strategy I'm using right now in my life isn't working. Right? It's frustrating. Mm-hmm. And so the brain literally goes, this is frustrating. We need to learn something here. We need to think about this differently. We need to assess the situation. And the brain literally opens itself to learn. And so this is why I say, in those moments, the last thing we want to do is turn it off.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing we go to. That's the first thing we go to. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And this has been so enlightening for me.
Totally.
Right. And it's been such a game changer for me, because I practiced this other way for so long.
Well, sure.
And, I just always felt like I had to keep doing it over and over and over again. It like never ended. Right. And it's because the emotional communication was never getting integrated. It's like a kid when they say, hey, can I tell you something? You need to hear this. And you're just like, yeah, can you just stop? They get louder.
Yeah. They keep telling you.
They find the pots.
I got something to say.
Exactly. And they start banging it.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing I just want to say about stress, which I thought was also very telling, I can absolutely tell your listeners right now a guaranteed way to never be stressed again. But stay tuned to our next episode. No, just kidding. The absolute guaranteed way to never be stressed again is to not care. That is the prerequisite to stress. Right? Hope, were you stressed out about the Ronaldo not starting in the Portugal World Cup game recently? Were you really, did you lose sleep over that?
You can't say that.
Okay. All right. Right. Why didn't that stress you out? Because you don't care. That's not, that's important to you. Right. And so it is literally the only way not to be stressed. Now, I'm pretty sure you, me, and the listeners here aren't looking to not care about things.
Right.
You follow me?
Right.
But and again, I think we have to be careful with some of the things out there that say just be unattached.
Right.
And in some circles, that's the ultimate goal.
Right.
And I've been in those environments where the goal is to be unattached. The root of all suffering is attachment. Like, wait, what are we talking about here?
Right.
Is attachment just a fancier way to say not caring?
Right.
Like, how slippery is this slope? And I've just seen it misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I've seen myself and others become very dissociated from themselves.
Right.
Because they're dissociating from that internal communication system that's really, really trying to help us. But we're hitting the bullseye on the wrong target. And it's like, all right, well, how do we get more connected? Even though that I don't want to keep going down these rabbit holes, but I think sometimes it's very painful to be too connected to some of the pain that we've had. Right. Yeah. I mean, trauma and things that have happened in our past. I think it's probably the biggest epidemic right now. But so sometimes it's painful to be connected to oneself. Right. But if we can help people create an environment of a compassion inquiry, to borrow from Gabor Mate, an incredibly brilliant trauma specialist, like that compassionate inquiry to go inside of oneself, accept all parts of us and seek to understand these parts of us as opposed to trying to get rid of them. Right. Exactly. I think that's the key. I think that's the key there is this kind of desire for like a deep understanding and learning more rather than just pushing it away and wishing it would just go away. Exactly. Like that's and I don't blame people for wanting pain to go away. Totally. Yeah. Nobody likes to feel pain and grief and shame and guilt and all those emotions. Like, and if you have no other option, like humans have an incredible ability to disconnect. Right. Totally. One of the things we have an ability to do, and it's life-saving, especially if we're children in an environment that's nothing but pain. Right. Like our system just goes, all right, turn it off. And thank God it does. But I think that's so true. And I love that advice about the stress. And it's funny, there's a girl that I follow on Instagram, and she's like an autoimmune specialist, whatever. And she posted something the other day about when people have an autoimmune disease, and the first thing they're told is, oh, your autoimmune disease means that your body is attacking itself. So then you automatically are like, well, crap, like, okay, my body is like, hates itself. So like, what am I supposed to do about it? So then all of these emotions come up. And so now you feel like your body is like, revolting against you, rebelling against you, and your body hates you. And so now they're like, and it's just, how is that helpful? Right. Exactly. Hope? Exactly. So it's like, okay, this is, and I feel like it's related to what you're saying, where it's like, for sure, this piece about like, I just feel like that's just this whole, like, it's just, let's just perpetuate the stress response. Like, how about that? Like, that's exactly what it does. You're pouring gasoline on a fire. Yeah. Yes. And that's the other piece about the health paradigm or model that I also saw consistently across physical, systemic, and mental, emotional is all of the techniques created dependency. Meaning you'd have to do these things forever. Yeah. Which is extremely, beneficial if you're in business, right? Totally. You know what I mean? Again, unintended consequences, we'll just keep it in that category. But at the end of the day, it's much better for me to give you something that you'll be dependent upon for the rest of your life. Right. From a business standpoint, let's just call a spade here, versus, hey, you don't need any of that stuff. Here's how you can empower yourself and not be dependent on anything. That, to me, that's vitality. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I think the vitality piece, I feel like the word's so overplayed, but that empowerment piece that's the piece of it, is because, because that's what happens. Like, you feel like your body, in this particular example, like you feel like your body is just, it's attacking itself, whatever, I'm giving up. And so then, I go to the doctor, whatever, and that's my only choice now, because the doctor's telling me my only choice now is to take all of this medication. I'm going to be taking it the rest of my life. There's no other conversation about anything else or any other options or any other like avenues for you. Like there's nothing else. You give away your power to this thing, and then that's your life. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to autoimmune disease, forget my book for a second. I would highly recommend this other book. It's Gabor Mate's new book. It's called The Myth of Normal. If you just read the chapter on autoimmune,
Mm-hmm.
it is so empowering to anybody who's struggling with that. And there's no shortage of people struggling with autoimmune stuff. And it's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
He also wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have that book. I know that book, but yeah, that's different, but that is a good one. That's such a good one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but yeah, it's, I feel like we're on the cusp of really changing a paradigm here. And that's why it's so fun to be on the phone with people like you who are already chomping at the bit. And they're like, yeah, man, I'm finding this too. I'm finding this too. Right. Like it's very exciting. And it's an exciting time as much pain as there is in the world right now. I'd like to be hopeful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And say that, maybe the trajectory has changed, right? Because that's what's really the most important.
Yep. The shift. Yeah. So leaving people with, not that we haven't talked a whole lot of tangible takeaways here, but if there was anything you wanted to leave, I like to give little tangible takeaways here at the end for people looking to, like we're talking about, like stop trying to avoid stress, like, lean into vitality versus health. Like what are the biggest takeaways that you can give people right now? Things that they can start doing now.
If you like said, Matt, if there's one thing that could help everybody, I would say, and I've really been thinking about this a lot, Hope. So I've really been racking my brain. It's like, there's one thing that I could offer to somebody, or if I could give them one skill, it's the ability to slow down. We're so much on an automatic pilot. Like, if you've read the book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, or, there's all this, I don't know if you've heard the little, how many animals did Moses bring on the ark? Do you remember?
2 of each. That's all I know.
Right. But it wasn't Moses, it was Noah.
No. Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm saying? But that's an example of our brain.
Yes.
It goes to what's called the cognitive unconscious. It skips things. It goes fast. Right. And so very quickly we have Moses on the ark when we all know it was Noah's ark.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so the only way to combat some of these, we'll just call it super fast schemas from our past that has us kind of recreating the same reality over and over again, we got to slow it down a little bit. Yeah. And so I think of them as kind of little micro kind of resets. I call them like get to 10,000 feet. Sometimes you just got to get to 3,000 feet. I would say once a year, you should get to 20,000 feet and slow it down and really start to tune in and become more self-aware. I think self-awareness, slowing down are so important, because if we can't do that, we can't execute these new schemas and these new templates and these new things. Right. And so any kind of practice where you're sorry, I think you might be hearing my dog.
You're good. She's okay.
We're actually fostering a whole family of puppies right now.
Sweet. So. That's a lot.
Yeah, I think he's aware that they're awake or something. But slowing down so we can execute these incredible things that people have to offer. And then the last 2 things, which I think definitely syncs with your message, Hope, is 2 things. One, really focus on trusting yourself again, and don't settle. It's the other thing I would say is don't settle for anything but what's possible or what you want in your life. Like, just don't settle, man. Like, it's all possible. Slow down, find people that can, support you in the proper way. And, you'll surprise yourself.
Yeah. I love it. Such good advice. And you're like speaking to my soul, because my biggest thing is always self-awareness. Like I talked about that on so many other podcast interviews. So I love it. Awesome. I can agree 100%. So I do have one more question I want to ask that I like to ask everybody before we finish. But before I do that, tell everybody where they can find out more about you and your book that is doing really well. So where to find that. I'm doing much better than I would have thought. We've gotten quite an amazing response. Bestseller on Amazon right now. So awesome. That's very exciting. You can get it on Amazon. It's just called Health to Vitality. Matthew Lobosco. You can also go to healthtovitality.com. I have different courses, and actually just recently released an app where people can engage with the movement stuff, the systemic stuff, and the mindset stuff, like all the different pillars that you read about in my book. We're really
trying to give people as many resources. And the book comes with a ton of resources, like it costs nothing. So you could pay 99 cents for this book and get all of the resources, hours of videos, little routines to help you stay healthy, lots of stuff. So really tried to give people as much value as possible to help just with a little nudge of consciousness in this trajectory that you and I have been talking about.
Yes, I love it. That's amazing. And of course, I'll have links to all that in the show notes. And I love that. It's so generous. I mean, you're doing so much good work. This is awesome.
I'm trying.
Awesome. So the question I like to finish with, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Trust what's most important to you right now, and don't worry about needing to know what the purpose is for your whole life. Okay. I think if you trust yourself that right now, this seems very important to me, it'll take you to the next place. Once you fulfill that, the next thing will occur to you. I think we are trying to make sense and control a intelligence and consciousness that we're never going to understand. And so if we can just trust the whispers, right? Put a little bit more weight on the whispers, I like to say. And if that's what's important to you right now, don't let anybody talk you out of it. Go for it. And don't think you have to commit for the rest of your life or the next 10 years. You don't need to know what you need to do for the rest of your life. Like right now, it's like, you know what? What's really important to me is to do this one thing. And that's what I'm going to focus on for the next 3 to 6 months. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. You don't need to know what the rest of your life is going to look like. And even if you think you do, you're probably right. From my experience, anyway. I
love it. Totally. Yeah. We always think we know where we're headed. And then
I always call it the perceived plan, Hope. Yeah. It's the perceived plan.
It's so true. It's so true. Such sound advice too. I love that. Thank you so much for that. And I thank you so much for sharing all of your insight, everything you've learned. I mean, you've just shared so much, and I love everything you're doing. And I love what you're doing to help just shift the conversation and shift the paradigm. And it's such important work. So thank you for that. And just for sharing your time with us today.
Yeah. Well, it takes one to know one, Hope.
Thank you. I appreciate it.